Okay, if I can get my microphone back up again. This is a special treat for a journalist who's followed this man's rise over the last 10 years. Originally working for the Department of Economic Development here in the UAE, set up the first free zone, and with the development that took place here, so when he came onto our radar at CNN as a business story, created the Emirates Hills, a number of the different developments that you see here in terms of housing. But who says that size doesn't matter when it comes to the world today? I don't think he came onto the global stage and actually helped with the UAE profile until the Burj Khalifa was built. So it's very interesting what takes in the world mindset of emerging markets and trade hubs around the world to put something on the map. So one could very well argue that the Burj Khalifa helped do that. And as Her Excellency Reem Al-Hashimi, the Minister of State, was suggesting, success has its many emulators. Other tall buildings are going up to kind of chase the sky-high 1 kilometer going forward. So again, an inspiration built out of here, originally coming from Asia, topped in Dubai, challenged in Jeddah, also challenges from China in the future. But it's not all about height, it's also about a success of a business, a success of an economic model. And our discussion that we're going to start off today in our bilateral discussion is moving into Africa, exploring the business links between the UAE, the broader Middle East, and going into Africa. Let's give a warm welcome here at the summit to Mohamed Alabbar, the chairman of Emaar.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you. Yeah, nice to see you. So we've broken our discussion down into looking at the Africa potential, something that picked up here, Mr. Alabbar, from our discussion on the previous roundtable, looking at the various sectors. We want to talk about the Dubai model as we see it today, and then taking that Dubai model, adjusting it for the next wave of growth. As you know, in our program, we look at the emerging markets, and we look at the markets from here to China and India, from here into Southeast Asia, Africa, and most recently from here into Latin America as well. That would have been a step too far 5 years ago, but Latin America now offers similar potential in the bridge between China and Latin America for resources. Now, looking at Africa, you've decided beyond the Emaar blueprint and what you've developed here to go into Africa in terms of natural resources. Now, this is a continent full of natural resources. We've had a commodity boom on demand coming from China and some of the other emerging markets. What do you see as the role for Dubai, specifically your business model, as a bridge between these continents in your view?
Well, first of all, I would like to welcome Their Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all of our guests into the United Emirates, and thank you for choosing Dubai for this visit. Of course, if you were to look at Africa, the forgotten continent, and then look at the Middle East, the so-called developing part of the world, and then look at Asia, it's a very interesting story because you look at Africa with its incredible resources, unlimited almost, and then look at the Middle East with its oil and gas, and then look at India, very hungry for resources, oil and gas and resources, and the same thing in China. It becomes a very interesting formula where if you are able to hub it all out of the Middle East, where you have the energy and Africa has the resources and Asia have the needs. And you know, we don't have to go very far when it comes to Asia because we are just an hour and a half away from 1.3 billion people in India. So I think that combination is a very interesting one. But I think what makes it very, very interesting, and I know that many of my African friends, they understand this, is that we also in the Middle East, we have ignored Africa. You know, we like to do business in Paris. It's very interesting to do business in London, maybe go to Hong Kong. But, you know, to fly south we haven't thought much of it, even though it's much warmer in the south. People are more welcoming in the south, and I'm talking about Africa here. So it's that has many, many elements that I think are very interesting.
Good. Africa, Middle East resources. This is kind of your latest venture. Give us a sense of what you're thinking. I know it's still early days, but earlier I was talking about the markets that offer potential in Africa. From the natural resources standpoint, Africa is a bounty. So as a businessman who can look at the entire continent, where are you drilling into, in a sense, for opportunity first?
Of course, my interest was that I spent 10 years in the aluminium business, so bauxite is something I understand well. In fact, almost 12 years ago, we almost started an alumina plant in Guinea. That's how my eyes got open to Africa. But it's interesting, I remember somebody sent me a video to tell me a little bit about Guinea about 12 years ago. And then I was just, excuse me, I was just so impressed. I was looking at the beaches and the beauty of the place more than the bauxite. And that's one thing you realize when you start flying to Africa. You realize the beauty of this continent, and you get really emotional about it. So that's really what drove me in, is my aluminium days and my bauxite interests. So looking into bauxite, iron ore, gold, copper, these are really the main resources that we're focused on. Of course, we as an organization, we started 4 years ago. Myself and my friend and partner, Sayyid Mukhtar Bukhari, out of Malaysia. Dr. Mahathir have been very supportive of our drive, because he's very emotional about Africa as well. So he works as a strategic advisor for our group. And of course, our focus, early permitting, we go into exploration, we get to sizing of our reserves, and then we start talking about keeping a chunk of the mine, and then bringing in people who are interested to invest, but also they bring in know-how when it comes to the activity of mining.
So you suggested Guinea initially. Are you looking at other countries?
Well, we are in Guinea, Madagascar, Niger, Burkina Faso, as quite active entities for us. We've been in and out of course, a country that I love as well, Zimbabwe. So I'm quite in and out of Zimbabwe. And in Zimbabwe, I'm a bit confused. I don't know if I want to do mining or just enjoy the beauty of that country. So it's pretty confusing proposition for me.
It's interesting. If you look at Zimbabwe, it's a phenomenal case that you bring up, because we haven't had a change in leadership there for 5 decades. So that doesn't deter you from investing in Zimbabwe yet. You think they're on the path to change, and you're comfortable with the governance structure there? Yeah.
Well, I come from the Middle East. I don't come from the United States of America. and coming from the Middle East, we're tribal people. We understand that, it's life is not the way people live in China. Life in the Middle East is not the way people live in London or France or New York. So I think we understand that evolution and change is a fact of life. One country will probably change a little faster than others, which is happening in certain parts of Africa. Other countries will take a little longer, maybe more complicated. So I think we should be fair. Is it perfect? The world is not perfect. So we should understand.
Good. In fact, one more point on this. The markets you picked out initially for your investments would be listed as more challenging markets. So you're saying the more challenging upfront, perhaps as a corporate governance structure or as a political structure, offers more opportunity, is what you're suggesting here. So you acknowledge that. You acknowledge there's a corruption issue. You work around these challenges, but you think an early mover status actually helps you in natural resources.
Well, I have to apologize. I've forgotten our activities, of course, in Uganda and Sudan as well. But if you look at the countries that we select, Africa is huge. So we look at the type of mining permits that are possibly available, what type of our geologists, what do they tell us about the quality of reserves in certain countries based on the geological information they have. Now, I know that many people, they start throwing, the word of governance, and they start talking about corruption and the rest of it. And I remind you again, I come from the Middle East. And in the Middle East, we understand that you have to do business in the most appropriate way, but there are challenges in Morocco for my real estate business, different than the challenges that I have in Turkey or in Erbil. But the truth is that I really think we are unfair, because you know how to solve the problem of corruption in Africa and the Middle East? Bring the lobbyists from Washington, D.C. Then you'll solve the corruption issue. Then there will be no corruption discussion. Right? So I really think that if you are not able to understand the potential of countries willing to take a little bit of risk, a risk you can stomach, because you also have to be careful is that if I do business in Dubai, I've lost money on some project in Dubai. I've lost the most money in the United States of America, 1.2 billion US. So Are you able to pick opportunities, size the risk, understand it? And I like what Her Excellency said. Go on the ground, meet people, see these countries, see it for yourself. What I've seen in Africa is so reasonable, is so fair. And I've been to many, many places, including the little, DRC, Lemumbashi, which I don't know if many people have been to Lemumbashi in DRC. So I think, John, I really think we have to be fair to Africa and the Middle East, is that, I think it's a manageable situation. People dramatize this corruption issue. I'm saying, listen, corruption in New York City, corruption in London, corruption in Bombay, corruption in DRC. It's where human beings are, you will have a bit of it. So I think we should be fair to Africa.
Good. Very interesting. The other thing that's been a major trend that we've been watching as of late, if we think traditionally about oil and gas development, we would point naturally to Nigeria, more recently to Ghana. But we're on the cusp of quite a big revolution taking place in East Africa, which has the traditional links with the Middle East in terms of shale gas and other natural gas deposits. Are you looking at this not necessarily as an investment opportunity, but sort of the wealth creation that it could propose to Africa in itself? It's not Western-dominated natural resources, but Eastern Africa, which has been starved for those resources, coming up on its very own and counterbalancing that sort of natural resource wealth.
Yeah. Well, wherever I go, people still know me as the real estate man. So sometimes I pull that card out where you're looking at East Africa, where there's a lot of wealth creation or potential of wealth creation. Then my real estate business does extremely well while these economies are improving, while growth rate is going in the right direction. So I can look at mining and look at as well the other activities like real estate.
Good. If you're going to rank Africa now, looking at potential opportunities, Latin America, work that you've done in Asia, and you see Africa growing 5.5%, 6%, do you think it's a sustainable model that the economies and the governance that we see today can let this wave just kind of ride on for the next 2 decades? Because this is quite extraordinary. It'll be the fastest growing continent in 2013 for the first time.
Sure. From what I've seen on the streets and all the wonderful cities that I've been to, I can't see but continuous growth. These countries, of course, everybody's suffering from unemployment issues, but these countries' balance sheets are healthy. They don't have the debt that Europe and the US have. These countries also are really moving forward. I would say that the term governance is improving dramatically. I think the unity in Africa is really incredible. So if you have issues like what happened to Mali, what happened in Mali recently, or other countries, you can see there is a unity in Africa where governments come in to support each other. So at least the reputation of these countries, the process in these countries, the protecting the democratic process is also doing well. So I'm really very, very bullish. But the real thing is that if you were to look at what's happening in the world, is that the economic activities in the world are slowing down, and of course, as a result of that, natural resources value and growth of income is probably going down. But we know very well that it's going to pick up in a few years' time, and that's going to be reflected positively on Africa.
Good. So this commodity correction we're seeing today, you don't see as a sustainable correction, that demand from China, demand from the emerging markets will counterbalance the sharp drop we've seen in Europe? Is that what you're kind of planning for?
Well, I think even in Europe, I mean, America is picking up speed a little bit. How real that is, we still have to discuss. But still, we're talking about, Asia is about 3 billion people, along with, of course, the Americas. So I would suggest that life is going to come back and economic growth is going to move forward. And as a result, the winner is Africa, without a doubt. So if we are doing 5%, 4.5%, or 5.5% across African economies, I only see it getting better.
I talked about this in our previous panel about the airline links and routes that have been set up. Let's delve into the Dubai strategy, if you will. If you have that air route that opens up into a certain market, does Emaar naturally say, this is my time to at least explore what's happening in Tanzania, for example, what's happening in Kenya, for example, other markets into South Africa. What has been the direct relationship? I kind of think, I speak about it almost theoretically. Gerald Lawless talked about it from the standpoint of Jumeirah. But for Emaar, when you see a link and you see Emirates, Etihad, Qatar, what's it do to your radar in terms of honing in?
Sure. Of course, Emaar as a public company, time is very valuable. Therefore, we are managed by quarterly results, and our shareholders are very rough and tough. So if we see opportunities, if it's really the way Emirates Airlines run its business and which direction it goes, we look at market size. Even if there's a great activity in a certain country, but if it doesn't have the size, then we don't really go in, because we don't have time to do 1-2 buildings. We are into large-scale development. Therefore, for example, Nigeria is on the radar, Angola is on the radar, and we've been in and out of these countries. But I agree with you. I think Emirates Airlines is a great lesson, no doubt. But Africa is definitely the roots of where Emirates Airlines goes is something that's very interesting, and that's why with their activities and flying through, I think through Maputo or into Johannesburg, of course they're active, but when you go to Zimbabwe and you see Emirates Airlines starting that activity there, actually that encouraged me more.
Interesting. One more question on Africa, and then I want to talk to you about the Dubai model here. What are your top 4 markets from an Emaar standpoint, providing the size of scale, the growth in middle income that we've seen grow 30% over the last decade alone? What would you say priority markets from a real estate investment standpoint, project investment standpoint in Africa?
Of course, Dubai is unmatched as a city. But if you look to Africa, I think I would say for us, Uganda is very interesting. I would say that Mozambique is quite interesting. We'd love to do some work in Nigeria. I think that's an interesting. Ghana is very interesting. Of course, Angola is very interesting as well. So these are the markets that I look at that I really think are quite interesting, and markets that we know. Most probably there might be some other markets that maybe we don't understand them well yet, because we talk over 50 countries in Africa.
I was going to say there's a lot to choose from.
Yes, true.
Let's look at Dubai. Should we be concerned about this drop in property values and even the amount of transactions in the first quarter in terms of reaching kind of a recent peak? What do you say about the falls that we've seen in the first quarter vis-a-vis the rise in land values of 63% over the last year? People are looking at this as a market for investment. What do you make of the correction in the first quarter vis-a-vis the gains that we've seen in the last year?
Well, last year, of course, it's the first year where the market breathed after harsh 4 years of global slowdown. So, slowdown was not really here. Slowdown was all over the world. So it was the first time that the market moves forward. I think probably first quarter people adjusting to no doubt to reality. But from recent launches, we do launches almost every week. And that's the policy that we follow as a company. So on a weekly basis, we have projects coming online, very strong demand, very strong appetite for middle and for upper market. And I see that this continuing, provided, of course, we control the flipper situation, because we have people who flip. And, the use of technology is helping us really control how much is being flipped, if we can. But it looks good.
How do you control that? That's a very interesting point. It's the same names that come up on the buying registry, and this creates the frothiness in the market and pulls away from the sustainability from the Emaar model. How do you tackle that in your view?
You can never really stop people who flip properties, and that's part of life. That's part of business. People like to trade, buy and sell. But with the technology that we have a mainframe system that's just incredible. So if you buy and you flip within 30 days, actually, automatically, the system will never allow you to come and buy with us again. But of course, people are very smart. They bring in their friends the next time. They bring in their cousin the next time. So it goes on and on. But now we're introducing a new rule, is that if we want to come and flip, then we ask you to pay another 10-20%. Other people, what they do, they go back and they probably flip on a side paper off from the contract, which is risky for them. But you really need to basically continuing to improve your process, and you'll never stop it. It's a fact of life. It will continue. But at least you make sure that you are really trying to minimize that activity.
Are you worried about a bubble then? Because this is a big concern, because you learned a very painful lesson as an emirate during the 2008-2009 period. Are you concerned that the bubble is reforming here in Dubai?
Of course, we had an operation in America, and in the States, we've faced flippers. I think, we've got people in France who also do this. We've got people in Singapore. So flippers, and I call them traders, people who buy and sell. They will always exist. But what's making the situation a little better is that the banking system do not give room for any of that. And if they do, they're asking people to make a lot of down payment before they actually are able to transact. So that is giving us control. I think the government's also watching these activities as well. And we watch it almost on a daily basis. People will always come in, and we'll always, we all want to make a bit of money on the, by flipping, by buying a car and selling a car, buying a building, selling a building. But these guys, they buy an apartment and they sell it after 2 weeks. So you'll have to be careful. You have to watch it. And even though people have learned the hard lesson 4 years ago, we are human beings. We forget, and greed is quite a big thing in our DNA.
Let me follow up, though. Are you concerned about the market being overvalued here? Or are you comfortable the levels that we're at?
No, I think I'm comfortable at the levels that we're at. And you will see us that, we are very cautious on our prices. In fact, sometimes we try to give reasonable prices where we have a reasonable margin, and it goes out of control. Like about 2 weeks ago, we launched this project where we just went out of control and we couldn't control the crowd.
Lines forming in the rest?
Actually, it was a bit more than that.
Yeah, a bit chaotic, in fact.
A bit chaotic. Police had to get involved and all that. But we thought we have given the customers a good price, but it was maybe too good. But that's how cautious we are. We don't want to drive values too high. We're making a good margin. We want the customer to make a good margin as well.
Good. Let's give an insight into Mohamed Alabbar so people understand where you've come from in terms of economic development department, what you built, the challenges you faced in that crisis that you've talked about in the past, and where you see Emaar going in the future. As a publicly traded company, your stock was trading around 47. It's gone up but almost 90% in the last year in this recovery, but still trading about 1/5 from its peak. What did you learn as a CEO of a public company during a very painful correction in the property market?
Well, of course, what we've really learned is that if you try to be very careful and stay away from your bankers, it'll be a good thing. Because the good days, they're all running after us, and they're saying that our balance sheet is so inefficient. And we tell them why, and they say, you don't have debt on your balance sheet. And thank God, I had a brilliant chief executive, I give him the credit, not me, who basically was refusing increasing debt on our balance sheet, and that have really saved us, I must say. A very conservative balance sheet. So I would say talk to your bankers carefully. That's number one. And I love them because when I need money, I want them to help me out. But I think that was one thing. So we had a conservative approach, and the reason is that my top management, we all lived and worked in Singapore, and we got hit badly by the 97 crisis. The 97 crisis, we ran a business where we lost 50% of our business, and it was very harsh, and mainly was the same situation. So I think it was a good lesson. The other thing is that can you really don't take too much risk in real estate and build ahead of your customer, which means that, you see the market is strong, you build ahead of the market, and if anything goes wrong in real estate, you'll go bankrupt. So also we have not done that, so we're being careful. But what really hurt us is that we did invest abroad, and I think our investment in the US was a major mistake for us. And these are maturing economies. They don't really have room for you to make money in there. I would say that, having diversifying and being in different markets have helped us, because we have land at incredible value, which is really good for our balance sheet. Having a strong team on the ground that's really totally dedicated and passionate about the company is correct. And I really believe that being in Dubai have saved us as well, because Dubai have saved the company. The activities in Dubai and still our mall business, our hospitality business have really kept the company going during hard times. So it was a combination of all.
Interesting. $577 million in profit, 2012. The earnings that came out this week, down 8% in the first quarter, but the reoccurring profits particularly from your mall business, are solid here. Are you going to continue to change that mix to have more of the reoccurring revenues, and should we be concerned about the downturn in the first quarter?
I think the reoccurring revenues will increase a little bit, but I believe that our real estate business, trading business will increase drastically. The reason is that, we have this international accounting standards, which means that if you come to me today and you pay me, you buy fully a building that I'm constructing, I can never get that into my profit and loss account, because the accounting standards are so tough that you give me the money, it's in my account, I can only declare it as a transaction and as a profit the day I give you the key of the building, which is very harsh. So we have a lot of issues on accounting side. Our sales are basically booming, but it goes into our books for the years to come. So I would say that as a percentage, reoccurring income will be important, but I think our other businesses is on the increase.
The Burj Khalifa, now you've got people like Prince Al-Walid bin Talal wanting to go to 1 kilometer to go past the Burj Khalifa.
Yeah.
You've said in the past that you would like to build something beyond 1 kilometer in Asia. Have you picked your landmark, and is that a realistic aspiration for Mohamed Alabbar?
Well, anyway, we've designed that building in Jeddah. So I have 25 engineers who have actually designed that Kingdom Tower, and we've tendered it, and then by that stage we delivered it to Prince Walid to basically execute. I think we might try to do something a little taller. I think technology has really improved. I think the value of tall buildings in the world is important. Commercially, I think we've learned how to make money out of it, because it's very, very difficult to make money out of these tall buildings. They cost so much, but I think the trick is that how to make money out of these tall buildings. So the answer is yes, and I really think that, maybe Dubai needs another tall building. I mean, if you think of it, the reason is that, many people, and I wanted you to ask me this question, many people ask and they say that why Sheikh Mohammed says that Dubai have only achieved 10% of its potential. So there's 90% left. And you get amazed why. And the reason, and I asked him, and he said, the reason is that Paris is what, 200 years old or 300 years old?
Yeah, older, yeah.
Yeah, and New York is about 300 years old. London, probably what? I don't know. I'm not good at history.
Yeah, long.
He said Dubai is only 30 years old. So imagine how much left we have. We have a lot of time, and we have a lot of development, and we have to do so much. But what makes this interesting is that Dubai is becoming, if you look at only the Middle East, 300 million people, compared to Europe, 300 million people. People in Europe have London, Paris, Frankfurt, Munich, Geneva, Rome, Milan, Barcelona as hubs. While 300 million people, poor developing Middle East, has only one place, Dubai. Right? So we want Abu Dhabi to do well, we want Qatar to do well, we want Lebanon to do well, we want Cairo to do well, because we need a lot of hubs. But if we join and we say, listen, we're really the hub of Africa and the Middle East, then we are really very powerful group. And I must tell you one thing, John, I go everywhere and they call me foreign investor. Everywhere I land, I'm a foreign investor. I go to Africa, they treat me like family. So I want to salute all my African friends.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you one quick question. I didn't think you could get 65 million people to pass through Dubai Mall in a year.
Yeah.
Is that beating your aspirations? And what is the capacity? Can you actually hit the 100 million mark of people passing through one structure like that?
Well, of course, I want to tell our audiences that actually we have about 1,500 electronic sensors in the mall that we get every night, counting how many people came in, came out, and it's audited by our auditors. So when we tell you 65 million, it is audited 65 million. We've never thought we'll get to 65 million. This is just unbelievable. And if it tells you one thing, it tells you that this city has a leadership that is just unbelievable. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, I must tell you that he amazes me every single day. So it's really coming from his spirit, his wisdom, his motivation, his positive, incredible positive thinking. We have reached our limit in capacity of handling people. because we are always very concerned about safety issues. We are concerned about incidents. So if you know what goes on under the mall, you'll be amazed the type of services we have for people. That's why you see a lot of our hoardings are coming up on the mall, because we are actually going for a massive expansion to increase the size, to be able to accommodate. And many of my American friends, they say, why do you have so much traffic in your mall? I say, listen, 50% of the Middle East population are women. And women in the Middle East, they don't go play volleyball. They don't go river rafting, right? So they don't go mountain climbing, you know. So that's why we're blessed with many fabulous customers.
I'm not sure that's going to score you a lot of points after this conversation, or not.
It's good moment business. It's good. and it is how they entertain. That's how entertain. But also our men the same.
Okay, you can steal something from me. It's having lived in Rome. It's the modern day Agora. That's your next pitch, right? It's like the modern piazza at the Dubai Mall. 65 million is conservative. Can you actually push it up with the expansion to 100 million a year, then?
Well, anyway, the incredible thing is that our first 3 months we are up 18%. That's actual number, 18%. So we'd like to push it. But you know, you've got road issues, we've got traffic issues that we need to deal with. Therefore, we have a plan B, which actually we have the construction for something else that will ease the pressure after about 3 years.
Okay, very good. Final thing, before we let you go, it's a very interesting conversation. You've gone into Erbil, looking at a project there. Yeah. You went into Syria in the past, Egypt in the past.
We're still in Syria.
Yeah. So what do you think are good markets here after what we've seen in the last 3 years with so much political upheaval? Yeah. Where do you see in the Middle East market offering, perhaps for our African investors, opportunities where Emaar feels comfortable?
Well, I think India market, we'd like to push it. But you know, you've got road issues, we've got traffic issues that we need to deal with. Therefore, we have a plan B, which actually we have the construction for something else that will ease the pressure after about 3 years.
Okay, very good. Final thing, before we let you go, it's a very interesting conversation. You've gone into Erbil, looking at a project there. You went into Syria in the past, Egypt in the past.
We're still in Syria.
Yeah. So what do you think are good markets here after what we've seen in the last 3 years with so much political upheaval? Where do you see in the Middle East market offering, perhaps for our African investors, opportunities where Emaar feels comfortable?
Well, I think our India market is good. India is a tough market. It's not easy, but we are in about 20 cities in India, and we've gone through tough times the past year. I would say I'm still bullish on Turkey. Saudi Arabia is very strong for us. I will still go back to North Africa, which is really strong as well for us. We're doing well in Egypt, by the way. But you know, one have to really look at what's happening in Egypt. We're doing well because out of the 4 largest developers, 3 actually had almost stopped because of the political issues they have, while still our sales are strong, our construction is still going on strong. But one have to be careful and look at what's happening in Egypt. I thought Egypt should be fine because, you know, I remember when Suharto went out of power after 30 years in Indonesia. I was there, and there was a bit of turbulence, but they were able to manage. But in Egypt, it's a little different, and sometimes I say that, you know, we have softer Muslims in Jakarta compared to our brothers Muslims in Cairo. So there's a little bit of character issue, but you know what? It's a learning process. Everybody have to go through the learning process, and I'm sure our colleagues in Egypt, they will go through the learning process as well.
What do you do about Syria? Because the world doesn't know where Syria is going.
Yeah.
It was a promising market. Other Gulf investors went in with you, actually.
Syria was the most profitable single market for us. We had a huge site. We built a little bit. We sold. We got our money back. We recovered the cost of our land and infrastructure. So we're sitting in Turkey free with a little bit of cash waiting for the situation. It's very confusing in Syria. I will not pretend that I know what will happen. No matter what, it looks tough.
Good. It's a real pleasure to have you for the half hour. I appreciate it. Nice round of applause. Mohamed Alabbar.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, just a very quick housekeeping announcement here. We're going to go straight into another plenary session. There'll be a lunch after that. Mr. Alabbar talked about the presence of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. He's going to be coming to the conference to take part in about 2 hours from now, at 2:15. So please mark that on your schedule and agenda for the rest of the day. Thanks for your attention. I appreciate it. And again, thanks to Mr. Alabbar for the time.